Welcome back to Arise Prime Time, where we offer perspectives on the news and talking points of the day. I'm Charles Anyegolo, and this wouldn't be Prime Time without the presence of our guest analysts to give their personal perspective on nearly everything we've covered in the program. And today I'm joined in the studio for the rest of the show by Arise News analyst and former chairman of the editorial board of Daily Trust newspaper, Mahmud Jega, and by the public affairs commentator, Arise News analyst, and head of mass communications at Bayes University in Abuja, Professor Abiodun Adeniyi. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Let me come to you, Prof, first. What do you make of the fiery, enduringly entertaining Buba Galadima?
Well, it was an interesting exchange, very entertaining, predictably anyway. But of course, he also made some points, around some issues, the manifesto of his party on some topical issues like population control. I saw that you insisted on bringing out a response from him in that regard. Yes, he talked about, encouraging people on the number of wives they want to marry, the number of children they want to bear. We've had this before. I think Babangida tried it before. And when he came out with some kind of population policy. But those policies are largely advisory, because some of our practices as Africans, as Nigerians, they're actually rooted in our cultures and in our religion. It might be very, very difficult to change people from those patterns, those particularities.
Things like polygamy, for example.
Particularly. Right. What we do in modern times, particularly what I think multilateral agencies are advising is to educate people, who participate in marriages, to educate them to a level where they can own their decision, they can take decision, particularly the girl child, get them educated up to secondary school level at least, such that they'll be able to take a possession, take responsibility for what they want to do and what they do not want to do, to prevent a situation where they'll be taken into marriage just like that and continue to bear children, thereby growing the population of the country in a way that probably don't want to happen. Then I discovered that in terms of tackling insecurity, they're emphasizing so much on the kinetic, increasing the manpower. First of all, he was very economic about how they're going to fund it. He wasn't too elaborate on that. But what's also more important is the fundamental thing that causes insecurity, which is the contradiction in the political economy, the gulf, between the rich and the poor, the situation where we have high level of depraved citizens because of joblessness, because of hopelessness. Those kind of systems will continue to breed nihilists. And when you have nihilists like that, their mind is strengthened, and there's no kind of matter that you want to bring against them through kinetic means, through increasing the fighting forces, put boots on the ground that can actually deal with them. Those contradictions have to be resolved one way or the other. Strengthen the economy, let the political economy be better managed, such that the mass of the people can have access to resources. They can have hope for tomorrow, and of course their mind will begin to go away from criminality. That aspect has to be looked at. Otherwise, you cannot continue to use force. Because resort to force. Yes, it's the state has a monopoly, but of course we are seeing situations where the state is being challenged through the rise of non-state actors.
Right.
And we have to look at the soul of the crisis rather than
that's a very good analysis. And let me come to you, Mahmud Jega. What stood out for you in what he said? I mean, we were with him for about 40 minutes, and he made a lot of points, didn't he?
He made a lot of them. Prof is absolutely right that unless you combat the root causes of criminality. On the other hand, if you have the current level of criminality that we have, like Buba Galadima said, is the number one problem, and without solving it or tackling it, then you cannot even hope to have economic revival, because when farmers cannot go to the farms, people are afraid to travel. There is so much brigandage against pipeline facilities and others. So the striking thing he said was about increasing the number of people under arms to 2 million. It's interesting because many other people have actually advocated that the boots on the ground are too few. The military and even the police never envisage a situation where we have Boko Haram,
Yes.
bandits, kidnappers,
multi-headed
hydra-headed criminal problem with the pipeline vandals there, then the farmer herders clashes, communal clashes everywhere. So it is very clear that we need more boots on the ground. And the 2 million that he mentioned, I think, is not outrageous. But he said other important things, because it's not just number. I mean, they have to be well-trained, well-equipped with good communications, good mobility, good welfare system, and the technology. Because he made a point about that.
Yeah, actually, their manifesto makes a point of really
technology.
Talking about the need for technology.
Yes,
You've got to bring them up to date, basically.
He said so. You know, he made that interesting point about how a small phone repairer can detect a stolen, especially iPhone, anywhere, and why is it that we cannot leverage on such technology for the security forces to identify kidnappers. I think that was a good point.
And he also talked about the economy, which is obviously an important thing. He talked about the security going hand in hand with the economy, but I wasn't very clear on how he intended to deal with the fact that Nigeria is an import-dependent country, that, you know, and that leads to a huge demand in foreign exchange. I mean, he didn't quite talk about how to deal with that, and the fact that, you know, you've got two parallel exchange rates, you know, for the naira. Granted, I didn't press him on that, but you sort of expected that would be, and I think they dealt with that in their campaign blueprint.
But I think the sense he was trying to make was that if we are able to deal with insecurity, of course, there will be better ground for economic activities to thrive. You know, farmers can go to the farm, like Mahmud was trying to say, and of course, you know, other things will begin to flourish. You know, because insecurity brings fear. You know, yes, we have to deal with it, but again, we have to realize that it's not just starting today. It's a problem that festered over years. You know, and it's not just going to be dealt with using just short-term mechanism. There has to be short, medium, and long-term mechanism. You know. It shouldn't, the manifestos, the blueprints, or the work plans of the political parties shouldn't just be focusing on the long term, on the short term alone. They have to realize that it's a problem that gestated over many years, over decades, and that's why it's been very, very difficult for us to track it. You know, 10 years after insurgency began in the Northeast, you know, they have to come to that realization. But I'm happy that it was not just to, you know, they are not concentrating on insecurity alone. They are hoping, you know, to multitask. As they are dealing with insecurity, they are also dealing with other sections of the nation's economy. You know, the health sector, he couldn't talk about it. He was eager to talk about education. He didn't talk about it. But I imagine that they are comprehensively laid out.
Well, actually, they did a very comprehensive explanation of what they were going to do with their education when they launched that document. But I was actually, to be fair, I was very impressed with what they did.
Absolutely. But you see, Charles, I think that as a media person, we are probably privileged to have an access to that manifesto. What about the rest of us? What about the rest of the citizens? So how are they going to project
Most of them are never going to get a chance to
I hope
it's
it's not coming. They're not doing it because they just believe that the average voter is not interested in manifesto. He will just vote because he has already made up his mind, so to say. There's a sense in saying that manifestos can go a long way, you know, in swaying people left, right, or center, as the case could be.
Yes, and one of the things he talked about, Mahmud, was the idea of plugging, you know, the leakages. And of course that brings us automatically to corruption. I mean, we didn't quite deal with that specifically, but he talked about reforming, you know, revenue generating agencies and that sort of thing. And I was quite keen to get a sense of how that would happen and how that would then dovetail into the fight against corruption, which is absolutely essential in a country like Nigeria where it's endemic.
It's absolutely essential, as you said, but one pointed question in which all the major presidential candidates must be pressed to take a position is the issue of fuel subsidy. Because that is the most immediate and most accessible source of funds. We are talking about trillions of naira now going down.
Which can immediately be made available.
Now, but of course it is politically explosive. So not many a candidate you are looking for people's votes and you tell them. Although the point has been made again and again that the poor people gain very little from fuel subsidy, and but that is the immediate source of money. I mean, if you are, I think this year, I think they are talking about 4 trillion or even 6 trillion in the next year. So people have to be pinned down, but maybe the way things are done in Nigeria.
They did touch on it in their thing, but I don't think it's radically different from what all the other people who said they're going to deal with it. Because essentially what they're saying is we need to take it out. We know it's the poor people are not, or the less sort of able people are not getting the most out of it. And what we need to do is to find a replacement. Public transport, efficient systems of transport to replace it. Therefore, they don't feel that sort of, when you remove it.
Yeah, but we had so many of these promises in the past. And when politicians or leaders started chipping a bit out of those, out of subsidy, they promise us, better transportation. The money is going to be diverted to infrastructure, but we didn't see so much of this. So, and that's why one of them was talking about trust. The question is actually trust.
It's a key point.
At this point, we need somebody who can trust. We need somebody who is able to assure us that I'm going to walk my talk. That's not just going to be about mouthing issues. I'm going to be concerned about execution, about implementation. Because that's actually the being of our development.
No, that's a very good point. We've got about 30 seconds or so. Are we at the stage yet when we can say that we've seen someone we can trust? Or do we still have a bit of a, the campaign is still going on, and we should hold our horses, as it were.
He said some very interesting things about, you trust a person based on his record. And like he said, for example, one major key to economic revival in Nigeria is power supply. And he said that when Konkoso was governor of Kano, he built some plants that generated 30 megawatts. Now, if you can do that all over the country, I'm sure it will contribute immensely
it most certainly
to
will.
Economic revival. Yes.
It most certainly will. Mahmud Jega and, of course, Professor Abiodun Adeniyi, always a brilliant delight. Thank you so much. That's it for this edition of Arise Prime Time. Join us again tomorrow from me and the entire team here in Abuja. Bye-bye, and thank you for watching.